are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to PNSQC's webinar titled The Product Owner and Context Testing Allies, featuring our guest speaker Ron Thompson from the IceCon group. Ron is also going to be speaking at our conference this year, and so what we're doing with our pre-conference webinar series is having some of our invited speakers kind of give a taste of what they're going to be talking about, either in their invited talk or in their workshop. So just firstly, a little bit about PNSQC. We've been around for quite a long time. We're the oldest software quality conference in North America, now in our 32nd year. And we have our conference every year in Portland, Oregon. This year, the conference is October 12th to 14th. And what's unique about our conference is that we're an all-volunteer organization, and most of our speakers are not really consultants, but really people in the trenches doing real work, and they come to share their experience. And it's really unique in that we have a lot of hands-on experience that is shared with the entire community. So that's what's unique about our conference. Just before we get started, in terms of for the webinar here, we've got some house rules. Basically, all of the participants are muted, except for, of course, Ron. And feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar in the questions panel. You will receive info on the recording and about the slides after the webinar, and feel free, of course, to tweet product owner and context throughout the webinar, and ask questions through Twitter as well if you like. My name is Phil Liu, and I'm with PNSQC. I'm on the board, and I'm moderating the webinar today. But really, the webinar is about our speaker and what he has to say, and that's Ron Thompson. Ron Thompson has over 30 years of experience. So I guess Ron's about 41. Is that right, Ron?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, you started at a very young age, and so now you've got experience. We're really glad to have you here on the webinar, as well as at our conference, and being able to share your experience. I know you're a product owner coach with IceCon, which is really a unique position. You really get to work with a lot of product owners, which I think is really some great experience to be able to share with us. So we're really glad to have you here.
Great, thank you.
So I guess what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn it over to you, Ron. If you would like to get going, I'll move the slides for you and take it away. Here we go. We got a poll already. Here we go. Okay. So I guess we're doing a poll. The poll is just trying to see what kind of people we have here online, and we're going to launch the poll. Let's see what we got.
Ah, okay.
What we're trying to figure out, we're trying to see, what kind of people we have here on the webinar in terms of their primary role at work as a product owner, a tester, developer, or other. And it looks like we've got quite a few testers out there.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Okay.
Testers are the predominant role, and then the rest of them are spread out evenly. So
okay.
I'm going to, mostly 50% testers, so that's interesting.
Great.
Okay. All right, I'm going to close the poll, and so we had 50% testers, Ron.
Great, great. Any product owners in the group?
We had a couple of product owners.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know that PNSQC has a large contingent of people who do testing for a living. So I really want to talk about the relationship between the product owner and testers. I'm currently a product owner with ePlan Services. It's a small company in Denver that has a mature Agile practice and a really strong test team. That team calls themselves testers, so I hope that term works for everyone. If not, just feel free to substitute your favorite term in your head. I've always understood the importance of testing, but working with this team has really shown me how much product owners and testers rely on each other. So I've really spent a lot of my career focusing on what I view as an overlooked player in software development, what's now called the product owner. So today I want to talk about that relationship between the product owner and the testers. And in the beer tasting world, which I love the theme of the conference, but in the beer tasting world, beer tasters need to know the style of a beer to judge it correctly. Software testing really has that same need. To test effectively, testers have to know what problem the software is designed to solve, and a big part of that's the context. So fortunately, one of the key parts of a product owner's role is to establish the context. So in this webinar, I'd like to discuss that part of the product owner's role and also the relationship with testing.
Why are product owners and testers allies? That's a good question.
Yep. Yeah. So when I say allies, I'm really talking about a two-way street. I get as much value out of the relationship with the testers as I hope they get out of me. So the things I'd like to talk about today are why are product owners and testers allies? What's context? And how does context influence the quality of the product? So first of all, I really see that product owners and testers are kind of in the same boat. They're often viewed as outsiders to the team. The developers are the rock stars. The product owner and the testers are there to really help them out. One of the things that I've really enjoyed seeing over the last several years is how the testing has become much more important, much better respected. In my one experience as a full-time tester about 15 years ago, I was testing third-party automated clearinghouse software for a bank for accepting a brand new system from this vendor. And talk about the definition of an outsider. I was on a contract with a bank trying to test third-party software. They didn't want to hear that their software wasn't working. So, we've gone from those days of being very much an outsider to really a part of the team, and I'm glad to see that. I'm starting to see where product owners are getting that same kind of respect and that same kind of attention. One of my hot buttons for product owners in the whole definition of Agile, Scrum, anything like that is there's sort of this appendage that just produces a prioritized backlog, as if that's a really simple thing to do. I think most testers can think back several years ago when testing was really just sort of relegated to the end of the project, and if there was time, we'd do it. So having having much more importance with the test team and more of the acceptance test-driven development and things like that have really helped the tester. But to some extent, we are viewed a little bit as an outsider.
That's terrible being an outsider.
Yes. Yeah, it can be hard sometimes.
Right.
It can be hard sometimes. Second, I really view the tester and the product owner as having a very similar mission. The mission is to get to predictable and sustainable delivery of the highest business value. So between the product owner, for me, that's 100% of what I'm doing. That is my life. For the test team, you're doing a lot of the same things, but with a little bit of a difference. The product owner is looking for what's the right requirement to deliver business value, what's the right story, what's the right feature. The tester is looking for whether the system behaves appropriately based on that requirement. So we're kind of, sorry, I've got a little background noise there. So we're kind of teaming up to help get to this mission of predictable and sustainable delivery of highest business value. Predictable because we know that we know when and how long it's going to take approximately to deliver things, and sustainable because we're able to continue to deliver that business value without having big jumps and big gaps.
So why do you say that it's a common mission of the product owner and the testers? Aren't the developers wanting to have this common mission as well?
They are, but when I work with developers, most developers I work with are they're interested in the business problems, but they're really focused on the technical solution. So you throw in the technical solution, they're really about sustainable delivery of technical solutions to problems. As long as you keep feeding them problems, they keep churning out the solutions for those problems. I see the product owner and the testers as being wrapped around that to make sure that the entire process continues to do that as well. Does that help?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess so. You'd say that the product owner and the testers are more concerned about the business value rather than the actual technical solution.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Wow, this is an interesting one.
So next is, I really feel like the product owner and the testers really serve in a jester type of a role. Classically, through time and history and literature, the jester or the joker is the one person that can really tell the truth to those in power. They can ask the tough question. They have the freedom to look at things a little bit differently. I really feel like both the product owner to the stakeholders and then the test team to me as the product owner and also to the development team is in this role of asking those tough questions, looking at things from all different angles. Right now with my team, I'm constantly bouncing ideas off the test team because they really have the best inside knowledge of how things work. A couple of months ago, we worked through a problem where there were several stories that were becoming a high priority, and so I worked with the test team to understand, what the impact was. And what we discovered was that the system already did some of those things, and people just didn't know about it. And so we were able to really, defer and get rid of a lot of work that people thought we needed to do. Without the testers' help, that would have taken me almost forever. So it's that ability to look at things in a different way and to kind of come back with the truth. Either the software works or it doesn't work. I could do a whole talk on the Jester Role, but I think I'll leave that for next year.
Well, when you have a Jester Role, and it certainly does kind of make you also furthers the role of being an outsider. So I don't know if that's good or not, is it?
Yeah, it's taking advantage of the outsider role. So next, in both of our roles, we really have to trust but verify. The verification step is so important. As I think about this and over the last couple of years and really kind of studying how do I best make sure things are really creating value. I spent a fair amount of time studying on things like biases and various effects, like anchoring effect, confirmation bias, things like that. So I recommend that highly to both the product owners and testers out there. Some of my current favorites are books like Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, any of the Dan Ariely books on behavioral economics. Those are all great insights into how the human brain works and understanding both for yourself when you're suffering from some of those, but also when you're seeing that on your team. In Kahneman's book, he talks about an intuitive system in the brain, that's system 1, he calls it, and a slower thinking system 2. I see both the product owner and the tester role as being part of the system 2 for the product development process.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are some pretty interesting books there, Ron. Would you mind listing out those books later on, and we'll put them on our blog? I think that would be great for our attendees as well as our conference participants.
I'd be glad to.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to. Those have been helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, context. That's a big word.
Yes, it is. So context. Let's talk about context a little bit, because that's in the title of the webinar. So let's talk about that. So context to me is all of the conditions and circumstances around whatever it is that we're trying to deliver. Whether in your environment you call it stories, requirements, features, products, projects, whatever you want to call those. Context is so important. It's really the environment that lives in. And I love the word context. It comes from the Latin, whose root is about weaving and interweaving things, having things come together. So for me, it's that one of the key roles of a product owner is establishing context. So who uses the product? What should it do? Why do the users want it to do that? How badly do they want it? In other words, priorities. What's the value of it? You know, how much value is it going to bring to the business? So all of those things are about the context. A number of years ago, I wrote a paper called Charter as Context, and it was about chartering and how that's a great tool to establish context. I still love charters as a way to establish context for whatever you're working on.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this your use of the word context for the product owner is more a really large, big picture kind of view versus the context-based school of testing type of approach.
Correct. Thank you for clarifying that. I do mean it in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So now I just want to take us through the product life cycle and talk about how context comes into play and how that affects the relationship between product owner and testers. The quality life cycle that I use, everybody has their own kind of diagram, their own words for these things, but they all tend to boil down to 3 or 4 stages in the process. So I talk about planning, building, and using the product. And product owners have a role, testers have a role in each one of these stages, and context comes heavily into play in all 3 stages. So in the planning stage, the context and the way I'm talking about it feeds quality. In order to both produce a quality product, but also to test that product to assess the quality of the product, you need to know more than just what the product is designed or kind of intended to do. You need to know some things like, what's the value that we want to get out of this? What's the priority in terms of the stakeholder priorities for this? Is there any risk involved in delivering it? How important is this to people? You know, is this something that just, there's a few people that want this, or is this something that the CEO wants? And also, what's the sequence? So what's the timeline? I probably spend more time with the test team during the planning portion of what I do than I do the entire team. I work together with a lot of the team in the planning stages to understand the system and things like that, and also to give them a preview of what's coming. but I spend an incredible amount of time with the test team. Feedback from the test team really helps shape things like, what order are we going to approach these things? You know, what do we do well? Where do we have the holes? You know, where do we have a lot of automated testing, so we're fairly safe to make some changes? Where are we a little light? Where, you know, where do we have to have stories that build up some of those some of that test base? I also will often bounce ideas off one of the senior testers, and the reason why is I find that the testers have a deep understanding of the system that even the developers who built it. The testers really have to dig in and understand how to make the system work and how to figure out the quality of the system. And so I spend a lot of time with those testers in figuring these things out. I also spend a lot of time with the testers in reviewing the automated tests. You know, over time, you lose sight of what the system was intended to do. And so going back to the automated test, that's the best history, even better than the code sometimes, to understand why is it that we built that feature the way we built it. And so I do a lot of work with the test team through the planning.
So, you know, as a product owner, I guess what you would do is you would take all of and you're basically looking at the backlog, and would you take these kinds of, I guess you could say, characteristics and apply them to the backlog and see which ones you do first? Is that how you would use this, or?
It does help me with that. It helps me know where, you know, where we may need some more lead time to be able to do certain new ideas that are coming up. You know, if it's an area of the system, let's say, that was written long before we were doing a lot of automated testing and might be light, you know, we may need to spend a little more time on that to understand it, to write some new automated tests, and things like that. So, so yeah, it will help me know what the priorities are. But it probably more importantly, it helps me know where we have risk. It helps me know where we may need a little bit more prep time to be able to deliver something. So that's really all of the things that I'm doing through the planning steps. From a testing standpoint, our test team will take you know, they'll be getting feedback from me on what's becoming important from the stakeholders. Where are they looking at going in the next quarter and the quarter after that? And it gives them the targets to go look at, to say, oh, you know, we need to beef up this area because we're kind of light in our automated tests in this area. I know it's upcoming, so let's start to look at this, and let's start to, you know, as we're refactoring tests, as we're adding new tests, these are some areas that we might want to focus.
Right, right. This is a really neat list of attributes. I could see this being really helpful if you had it on a whiteboard and had all the features or functions that kind of ranked and prioritized in some way. People would be able to use it to prioritize their testing or their development or whatever. So I think it's really, really interesting here.
Yep. Our process, I just wanted to say just a little bit more about the planning. In the process that we use, I know everybody's a little bit different. The process we use, our stakeholders prioritize kind of bigger themes, we call them, or as people like to do, they call them the big rocks, from that kind of that image of filling the jar with rocks. You put in the big rocks first. They plan out 2 to 3 quarters of things where they want to focus on these, as they call them, big rocks, things. I then bring those priorities from the stakeholders, I bring that back to the entire team, And we go through a couple of steps with the team where first I present the priorities so the team can kind of take them in, understand where the stakeholders want to go in the next couple of next few months. And then just before the quarter starts, we sit down. We just did that this week. We sit down and go through more in depth those priorities for the quarter, and we start talking about things like, you know, what's important, where do we have risk, what's the value of this, is there a certain sequence, is there a timing consideration that we have, so the team can start to take the plan out sprints a little bit ahead to say, well, let's target this for the first sprint so that we can cover the risk and know that we've got a few more sprints if we need. Let's target this towards the end because it's a really low-risk thing, and we know that it can slide. It's not as important. So we spend a lot of time as a team, and as I said, I then spend a lot of time in between these kind of bigger meetings with the entire team. I spend quite a bit of time with the test team in getting a little bit more detailed in these areas. Okay?
That's interesting. So actually you could have a lot of different things ranked. You could have something that's low value but high risk, or high priority but and high risk. So you would use that to figure out how to work out your plan.
Exactly. It's all a big jigsaw puzzle.
Seems like it.
Yep, certainly is. Okay, so the next area is when we get into the building stage. I would say probably at least half of what I do with the test team in the building stage is I write the initial acceptance test. The acceptance test kind of put a stake in the ground for here's what I think we need to deliver and the outcomes we want from whether it's a feature or a story, or these are the outcomes we want. This is what we want this product to do when this is delivered. So again, I'm teaming with the testers on the acceptance test. So I write the initial acceptance test, and then as we start to go through our pre-planning and our sprint planning, and then even within the sprint, now I've got a virtuous cycle of working together with the testers to answer more detailed questions about those. So they take those initial acceptance tests, and inevitably they have 100 questions for me. How does this? What is this? What do you want here? How do you want this to work? Should this do this or this? And getting those answers and clarifying those stories, really end up with, by the time we're executing on the acceptance tests and the testers are building automated tests around those, we've really clarified the stories, we've clarified the acceptance tests, and we really have we're much more comfortable with what the desired outcome is. The feedback that I get from the testers on the acceptance test as I write those, they indicate where there are holes or ambiguities. So getting back to the idea of context, context so much informs the acceptance test. It tells me, as I'm writing acceptance tests, it tells me, where do I need to focus? What are the highest value items? All of those things that we talked about with context. What's the value, what's the priority, what's the risk, what's the importance? It tells me where I need to focus on acceptance tests. Because as everybody knows, you never get 100% coverage on testing. You can't test every possible scenario. But if I know, where I have a certain amount of risk, I can focus some acceptance tests there. If I know where the key value I want to get, I'm going to have some acceptance tests there. If I know that something is really high priority and important to the business, then I want to make sure that that's going to get rolled out well. So, that cycle of working through the acceptance test with the testers, bringing context into play, gives us so much more value and leads to so much better product coming out of the entire process. I can't even begin to do acceptance testing justice. So one of the things I recommend is a good friend of mine, Ken Pugh, is doing both a talk and a workshop on acceptance testing. He'll get into more detail than I would ever be able to know about acceptance tests. So I highly recommend attending one of his presentations at the conference in October. Okay, so now we get into the use it stage. So when we get into the use it stage, the feedback we're looking for here is how are people really using this? We had an intent when we initially thought up an idea, when we created, this feature or this, these stories, a set of stories. we had an intent about what that would lead to. When we turn this thing out, as I like to say, into the wild, we find that there are so many ways that the product gets used that we never anticipated. In my view of the role of a product owner, one of the key roles of a product owner is not just feeding stories into the team and making sure that we're doing high priority stuff. It's making sure that stuff gets out into the real world, gets introduced into the production environment, and that the users understand what's coming and start to use it. So in my product owner role, I'm spending a lot of time out in the world as things get rolled out, helping people through. This is a new thing. So I work with the trainers to help train customer service reps on new stuff coming. I'm answering questions on what's the intent of this, how does this work, where did we maybe make a couple of shortcuts that I need to work around. And so as I'm doing that, I learn about what I like to call interesting uses of the software, workarounds and things like that people start to do. Also, I get a lot of stuff on the defects that we're finding. And, by defects, I don't always mean, some big thing where the software just isn't working, but it's minor things, unanticipated things that it's a little bit, it's not quite working right. I'm feeding all of that back into the test team to help them be more effective in both their automated testing and also their exploratory kind of testing. So, hey, the CSRs, we intended them to do this, but this is really what they're doing out there. You might want to try doing your testing in that way. Or I take the testers out to work with the users to understand how they're using something. Our test team feels really free to work with users and understand how they're using the products that are coming out of the engineering team.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, Ron. I was just wondering, as a product owner, and how do you get real feedback from real users if they're not, like right next to you, or how would do you have creative ways to figure out how users are really using the software?
It's I don't know that it's creative. It's pretty much kind of hard work and getting out with people and seeing. So some of the ways that we've done that, one, in our environment, the engineering team sits right next to the customer service and operations. So from that viewpoint, we get to hear it. It's not even that we have to go over and see it. We get to hear it. We get to witness it every day. When it comes to our users, the company I work for right now, we're kind of historically bad about getting feedback from the direct users, but now we're starting to get out there into the world. So about a month ago, I went and visited one of our key advisory firms who sells 401k plans for us, and I got to see how they were actually using the system. So getting out with people. We're rolling out some new user interface for for employees who have 401k plans or have 401k accounts on our system. We put a survey on that new homepage, and it's incredible the response we've gotten from that survey, just willing to give us feedback on what works, what doesn't work, what do I like, what do I not like. So it's all of those kind of things. I think it really just takes getting out of your seat, getting out with people. One of the areas of product development and information systems development over my 30 years, I saw a trend early in my career where it was all about how do I bring users into my project and have them there 100% of the time so that they can give me immediate feedback. I've always kind of fought against that, and I'm seeing more and more now where it's starting to swing the other way, where it's not about bringing them into an artificial environment. It's getting out and sitting with them and understanding how they use the product.
Yeah.
So it's really all about that to get the
Ron, we have a question here from the Rachel in the audience, and she's asking, it's kind of related to user requirements, is wouldn't you really want to find out how your code is used while writing requirements?
Oh, definitely. Good question, Rachel. While we're writing our requirements, one of the concepts that I just love, and we are looking for every opportunity we can to use, is the idea of lean experiments. So how can if somebody wants the system to do something, how can I very early on get feedback on whether that's going to be effective? So we might do that by doing a quick prototype, having people play with the prototype to give us quick feedback before we fully flesh out the idea. We might even have our sales team just start to say, ask people how important this feature would be to them, and if it was, what would they want in that feature? And so getting that constant feedback on requirements is, the earlier the better for both the value and also what it needs to do. So that answered your question, Rachel. One last thing I wanted to say about the use it is, one of the things that I do is I review. We have what we call a production support queue, which is essentially it's items that the system doesn't quite do, so the technical team has to do, or it's defects in the system get identified. I review all of the defects coming in daily. We get 1 or 2 items that come in on a daily basis. I review those daily to better understand how people are using the system, where they're running into problems. That both informs how I work with stakeholders during planning, but it also, I work with the test team to decide, is this really a defect, or is this just a new thing that people need and the system needs to do it? And then we get an agreement from the whole team on how to approach a resolution.
That's interesting. I've never heard that from a product owner. You're saying that you go through all of the defects. That could be a lot of work.
It is. I do a daily triage. As I said, we don't get a large number. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it averages probably 1 or 2 a day. Mm-hmm. And so I triage those as they come in every day and just look to see what category they're in, and then the really key ones we look into.
Right. I guess in a way you'd also find out how people are using it, using your software.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so when we get down to it, both the product owner and the testers are creating feedback loops. So it's the opportunities for learning. We learn about the quality of the system. We learn about how the system is used. We feed that learning back into planning process, the building process, and the process of using the system. As I talked about, some of the stuff that comes in on the production support queue for us are things where the user doesn't understand how to use the system. So in those cases, I'll either work with that user or I send that back out to the customer service training person who will work with all of the customer service reps to understand what the intent is of the thing. So again, these feedback loops, it's not a one-way street. I get at least as much as I'm hoping that the test team is getting out of the relationship with me. I probably get more than they're getting. But it's nice to have somebody who's kind of a fellow skeptic, and looking for that immediate feedback on the system and understanding the big picture of how the system works. So to kind of sum up what we're talking about here today, I view product owner and testers as strong allies in product quality. So we are coordinating on getting to a full understanding of the context of the things that we're doing. We're collaborating on acceptance tests throughout the building process. And then we're really coordinating our view of reality to understand how the system gets used. So, all of those things really makes us close allies, and I feel strongly that a product owner's relationship with the test team is probably one of the more critical relationships in the entire process. Probably even close to as much value as you get out of the relationship with the stakeholders.
That's really interesting. So, I just don't, I still kind of pondering this thought that the product owner is kind of an outsider.
Yeah. I look forward to kind of changing some of those opinions in my talk and my workshop. So that was a great introduction to, I just wanted to give a quick preview of what I'm going to be talking about at the conference in October. My talk is entitled Brewer's Yeast, Product Owner's Influence. And so in this talk, as I said early on in this webinar, I'm really happy to see the growing emphasis on the product owner role. It's long overdue. I've been working through this concept for a lot of years, and it's starting to really kind of come together with a lot of where Agile is going. And so I really want to talk about a role of a product owner and what I see as important. And what for the audience, I'm hoping that I'll get product owners, because maybe I can give them a new way to look at the role. I'm hoping to get people that work with product owners so I can maybe tweak their expectations a little bit. And then I'm hoping I get a few people that don't have product owners in their environment. And those folks, I really want to raise their expectations so that they go back and really start to fight for, we need this in our environment.
What's really interesting is you said that you just mentioned that some teams don't have product owners, but according to your title here, you have brewer's yeast. You can't really have any beer without yeast.
No, you can't. And and you do end up having an owner. It just is, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the talk. But if you can skip back one slide.
Sure. Oops.
So what I'll talk about is that, what makes a good product owner. You know, how do they influence the product, and what does that mean to quality? So I plan on covering all of those topics in my talk.
Great.
And people might learn a little bit about brewing and yeast as well, just as a little side benefit.
Do you make beer, Ron, by the way?
I used to. I say I'm a reformed home brewer.
Uh-huh.
I found that it was a lot of work, and there's so much quality beer out there that I can go buy it for a lot easier. So.
Right. Well.
Okay, and then if we can skip forward to the workshop page. And so the workshop that I'll be conducting is entitled Product Owner: A Day in the Life. So I'll use a little bit of the brewing theme, but the real subject of that workshop is to take participants through a day in the life of a product owner. You know, a product owner in reality is doing work on planning, building, and using all at the same time. Every day I'm probably doing something in each one of those stages. So this is a figurative day in the life. So we'll work through the entire life cycle and see the product owner's role in all three stages. So next slide.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think if there are a lot of product owners in your workshop, they may find that their agendas or their daily life would change.
It's possible. It's possible. And then I'll learn something from them as well. So the key points out of the workshop will be, you know, understand the product owner role. So we'll go into a little bit more depth than I did in the talk, and I really want people to get to experience some of the challenges of the role. So it's experiencing the product owner role and walking in the shoes of the product owner for a day. So, you know, we'll talk through a little bit about the product life cycle and how the product owner works through that life cycle. And then we'll also talk about how the product owner influences each one of those steps. If you can advance one slide. So the product owner's influence in determining the business value, so what do we want to accomplish, defining the release boundaries, so more specifics around the solution, establishing the context. We talked about that a lot today, and also creating feedback loops. And we'll relate it all to the brewing process, so we'll have a little bit of fun with the theme of the conference as well. So that's what I have. So I guess any other questions that came up?
I don't see any more questions from the audience, but just a reminder that if you do have questions, if there are those in the audience that do have questions, you can ask them via Twitter or Facebook. We'll be posting the stuff online, so there's plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions. I'd like to thank Ron for joining us today and giving us a glimpse of his two sessions that he's going to have at our conference this year. Here is Ron's contact information if you want to reach him directly or take a look at his website and follow him on Twitter. Here is Ron's info. Really great to have you, Ron. And then the last slide here is just really just talking about our conference. We're really excited this year. It looks like we're going to have record numbers at the conference. The conference is on October 12th. So if you haven't registered, get on our website and register. We have the titles of Ron's two sessions here. He's doing an invited talk on the product owner's influence, and like you said, a whole day workshop on a day in the life of a product owner. Just a reminder that we have recorded the webinar today, and we're going to be posting that on our YouTube channel as well as sharing the slides on SlideShare. Thanks very much, everyone, and especially thanks to Ron for joining us. Thanks a lot, Ron.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate the invitation to to both speak at the conference and also for this webinar.
Okay, well, we'll see you in a few weeks at the conference then. Thanks very much.
Great.